Hi, everyone. I'm Sophia,
I'm Leah.
and this is Magical Baddies, the realist podcast on all things mystical, magical, and spiritual. So this is the first episode from a segment we
Yay.
kind of created from Instagram Live, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah, we're going legit.
We're doing
Legitimizing.
this for real.
Yeah,
My kids can Google it later. So
exactly.
should we introduce ourselves first?
Yeah.
All
I
right.
love to introduce myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, after you.
Okay. My name is Leah Garza and I'm based out of Los Angeles. I am an Akashic Records practitioner and I do other healing work. I've been doing this for about 7 years now, and I'm also many other things, a PhD student, and yeah, I don't know, but I feel like that's the gist. I live in Los Angeles, but I'm an SF Giants fan, which is very controversial.
I
Yeah.
feel like well, do you want to tell them what your PhD student
Sure,
for?
yeah.
Because that's
Yeah,
huge.
it is a big deal, and it really informs like my spiritual work, and it also informs the conversations that we have in Magical Baddies. I am studying community liberation, indigenous, and eco psychology, and I study it with my school has my program has a decolonial lens. So everything that we study, everything that I'm reading, everything that I want to write about in my PhD is from a perspective of decoloniality.
Cool. We're gonna have to explain that and like really
I
dive into
know.
that.
Yeah, that will be a topic probably at some point.
So I'm Sophia. I am a mom. I was voted best granddaughter by my grandmother all of my life. No. I'm also an Akashic practitioner. I call myself a conduit. I channel psychic medium. And I would say I'm an amateur occult historian and researcher with hopes of one day being legit. We'll see.
What makes a legit what how do you define legit? Because I'm like, you are legit to me. Like I don't
By creating a podcast and a YouTube. That's how you go legit,
oh,
right?
that's how you get vetted. Yeah,
Yeah, that's how
okay.
you get legit. Yeah, so Leah and I, let's talk about how we met.
Okay.
Okay.
We
Because
met
that's
on
gonna kind
Zoom.
of inform our next
It's
session
true.
together.
Our next conversation.
Episode.
Yeah, we both have the same teacher in Akashic work, Helen Vonderheide, and Helen put on a class, like it was like a year-long class on developing your skills as an Akashic teacher, really in her like work that she's developing in the world. And I live in California and you are in Virginia. That's right,
Yeah.
Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, we met on Zoom, and this is like, I don't know, we're like 2.5 years into the pandemic, or 2 years into the pandemic when it started. And so we've been doing Zoom for a long time, for a couple of years, but up until this point, I had not made friends, and I'd heard of people making friends on Zoom, like, oh, I did this class, or I had this meetup or whatever. And then I met this person, and now we email and whatever. And I just like, I had been doing a lot of stuff on Zoom and I hadn't made that connection. So you're my first Zoom friend, which I find very
Oh,
special. Yeah.
so I've never had friends before. So you're you're my first friend. I'm kidding.
That's a lot of pressure.
I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, so I think this kind of dives into why we created this kind of container. But here's what it really boils down to. I think that there's a lot of fluff in spirituality. There's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
like people just don't resonate with. And in class, I feel like there would be times where things would come up and you just kind of naturally, or I do because I'm pretty judgy. Um, and I try not to be. I really do try not to be, but sometimes you can't help it.
You can't help
And
it.
And then, those memes where it's like the audacity, like, I would make that face and Leah would
Yeah.
make that face. And it just was a connection of,
Yeah.
like, dog, you see this? Doggy.
Yeah.
And that's what it kind of
Yeah.
boils down to. Like, not to like call anybody out or,
Yeah.
whatever, but it's just kind of like, I don't know. You meet somebody at a party and then you both make eyes and then you're both like, you get it. She gets
Yeah.
it. They get it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that was the connection.
Yeah. 100%. I think, especially, I don't know what the spiritual world is like in other parts of the world. And I guess it's not fair to localize it into a geography anymore,
Sure.
because like Helen's class did have people from all over
Yeah.
the place. But the culture of spirituality in LA is very much influencery and very social media like, and very like kind of fickle, just the way LA is. And so I had definitely become accustomed to meeting people that are into like these esoteric practices and knowledges, and yet they act so incredibly fickle and unreliable. And so I definitely have like associations with this world of like, it's not often that I meet people that I feel like are my people, like the kind of
Yeah.
people that can have, I don't know if any of that makes sense. I'm incredibly judgy too, so but I'm
I
not
think
even sorry about it.
at the end of the day, most people are. So like
Yeah.
if you say you're not, like, that's part of being human. We're all
Yeah.
like, we're all chipped and cracked, But
Yeah.
I would say from my perspective, so I hid my spirituality for a very long time. I was really lucky. I grew up in a family of root workers and seers, but I was always told, my grandmother would always say, like, don't give away hugs because you never know who wants a piece of your hair. Like, that's kind of like the way I grew up. And so we never really talked about it outwardly. And when I
Mm-hmm.
decided to do this work professionally, it was kind of a big deal. It
Mm-hmm.
for me, who has been programmed my whole life to hide it. And I think that probably comes
Yeah.
from a really long lineage of being looked at weirdly or different. And my family was
Yeah.
very isolated. Like, we didn't have family friends. We just didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was just our family. So when I started to put myself out there, it started with yoga. And the only thing I would see was, like middle class, upper class, like Caucasian women and Lululemon,
Yeah.
or the super crunchy herbalist
Yeah.
hipsters. And like, I didn't feel I fit, I like metal. I like hip hop, I like
Yeah.
my Air Maxes. I like
Yeah.
certain things. And I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't see a representation of me.
Yeah.
And even when I did start to find a small community, I always felt like on the outside. Again, like, it was like herbalist, it was yogic, it
Yeah.
was soft, it was gentle. And I come from a background where it's like sometimes you are the one that enforces the karma. We can manipulate our reality. Like,
Yeah.
darkness isn't necessarily darkness. It's things that
Mm-hmm.
I just have a different lens of seeing things through. And I just always felt ostracized. And I remember specifically, I decided to take like my yoga teacher training, and it was a bhakti centric one, which is the yoga of devotion. And it was like so
Mm-hmm.
heart opening. But I was just thinking about this the other day. I was pregnant with my second child, and when we would do groups, I was always last to be picked. And I'm like, I am a grown ass woman. Like, this is weird. Like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
elementary school all over again. And I'm not,
Yeah.
outward, like, I'm not overly outspoken or anything like that, but it just like felt really isolating. So um coming into that class, there's definitely so many different points of views, but it was just cool to feel like not only would I feel the need to speak up when I didn't agree with something, and I'm completely okay with that. I saw someone else do that as well.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, like it just felt, there was like a really cool connection, which I was really excited about. And I got to come meet Leah in real
Yeah.
in real life.
Yeah.
which I do not
Yeah.
recommend doing pregnant, because that trip to LA, like I was asleep for like 2 weeks. But I think this dives into like the bigger thing of like what we see represented in spirituality on Instagram, on social media, how it gets divided. There are
Yeah.
this like light and love, there are these like esoteric like vibes, but then there's also kind of like the people that lean darker, and how they kind of like keep like separate. And
Yeah.
you and I both study the mystical, the magical, the spiritual independently
Hmm.
in through different lenses. But I think
Hmm.
that like as we grow into this, we probably have like a lot of hot takes.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think we're both like just ready to speak on all of these, because I think
Hmm.
that it just creates this like narrative of what you're supposed to be,
Yeah.
of a formulation of how to be magical,
Yeah.
witchy, spiritual, whatever. And I think both of us are kind of like, yo, fuck that. Like,
Yeah.
there doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. There's definitely, so the reason I mention LA is because I moved to LA to become a teacher. I went to UCLA. I got my teaching credential there, my master's of education. And then I taught in South LA, and I spent most of my time in South LA. So if you're not familiar with LA, South LA is a fancy gentrified term for basically like everything south of the 10, but usually people use word terms like South Central, but it's been like kind of softened to be like South LA. But I worked in Watts, I worked in South Central, I worked in Compton, I worked in Linwood, I worked in different parts of South LA, and spent a lot of my time there. And as I was getting into the spiritual community in LA, there was like a total divide between who has access to the kinds of classes and meetups and things I was going to, and then who did not. And that creates like a subtext, or like a preconceived idea that like you have to be white, you have to be rich, you have to live in a certain geographic place, you have to have a certain level of education to access things that are birthrights, of our beings. Like, like it's to learn the Akashic records. Like, yes, you can learn yourself, but like, I highly recommend people like study with other people.
Sure.
But in order to study with other people, you have to pay for classes. And so it almost feels like, well, if I can't pay for classes, then I probably don't have access to this thing. But no, everybody can do Akashic work. And so I wanted to find, and I have found a lot of people, but I wanted to find people that were interested in this crazy, like esoteric stuff that I'm into, but wanted to like remove the gatekeeping that happens in like modern spiritual communities. And yeah, because it is for everyone. And it's not for everyone, like everyone needs to study the stuff I study, but like if you want it, it is for you. Like, it's not, you don't need to have a specific body or specific race or specific gender or income threshold to do this work, like to meditate. Like, transcendental meditation is huge in LA, and I understand why now, because some people, and it's very expensive to practice it, and it's very exclusive too. And some people, I realized, like when I first heard about it, I was like, that's bullshit. Like, everyone can meditate. But some people do need the like mental narrative, the story of like, I paid this money to do this thing, and so now it works.
Yeah.
And other people don't need that. And so but then how can you let people, or how can people like develop a meditation practice if that's what they want, without that gate, that barrier of like money being the thing. So,
I agree with you, and I think, but I also think it's so much more. I mean, the base of it is socioeconomical, right? But like there's so much more to it, because like even when you pay the
yeah.
money, like I know in my own experience, I've paid the money and I still feel like uncomfortable with the culture that's being presented to me, right? Like
Yeah.
you just feel completely different. And I think what we're saying is like, so what? Who cares? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's important to meet these teachers who have something to offer to the world. Like,
Yeah.
that's the coolest thing. I'm like so down with people who have a thing that makes them tick. Like
Yeah.
someone who's if you have a passion, I don't care if
Yeah.
you're the weirdo, like the weirdest person on earth.
Yeah.
If you have a passion,
Yeah.
I think that's fucking cool.
Yeah.
So I think that even if you scrounge and you talk to the person, you work it out, like being there is important. And you have to take in what works for you and what you resonate with and what you identify with. But I think that sometimes a lot of this is cultural, right? And
Yeah. Totally.
you know, I've got a way about me. I can be super fiery, and you know, but it's weird when you're in a place where it seems like everyone has the same narrative or
Yeah.
agreement or, you know,
Aesthetic.
aesthetic or anything, and you're kind of like, well, I'm not that, and it feels
Yeah.
really isolating. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
the same idea of somebody being put in a higher education or a better school, like you
Totally.
still feel removed.
Totally.
And I think that the cool thing about this now podcast, YouTube, whatever, is that we're here to say, like, grab what you need and like be you. Like
Yeah.
that's cool. You don't have to
Yeah.
identify or fit into a
Yeah.
formulation
Yeah.
of what is spiritual, what's mystical, what's magical. Like it
Yeah.
ultimately, like, subcultures all have like a thing, right? It doesn't matter if
Yeah.
you're punk, you're gonna look like a punk. It like
Yeah.
if you are into hip hop, you're gonna look like, there's going to always be that. But I think that finding who you are and being comfortable in that and like vibing with what you like is such a bigger task than a lot of people lit on.
Yeah.
And it's
It's so
hard.
hard. It's so hard because I feel like we're in the midst of a mass homogenization. I mean, not that we haven't been in previous years, previous decades, previous eras of our culture, especially in the United States, but like social media makes like a homogenization of everyday life. And we're all, I mean, not we, but like it feels like so many of us are trying to make our everyday experience match an image
Yeah.
that may have nothing to do with us, but it's that like, you know, really disgusting hegemonic oppressive sense of normalcy that governs our like we're like, it's interesting that you bring up like subcultures like punk and hip hop, because it's like within those subcultures, which both like originated as a resistance to mainstream culture, still became homogenized in how they,
Totally.
you know, like normalized and how you be punk or how you be into hip hop. Like,
Yeah.
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 And, you know, I think back to like when I was super into like indie music or hardcore, but I was still, you know, wearing Jordans and
Yeah.
whatever. And it's just like, I couldn't get a date because everyone thought I was a poser. But now all the hardcore guys are wearing like basketball shorts and Air
Yeah.
Maxes. So
Yeah.
suck it. So
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, like, I think individuality is a reflection of our super consciousness, right? Like
Yeah.
being cool with who you are allows you to reflect that in seeing the world, being cool with seeing the world as it
Yeah.
wants to actually present itself.
Yeah.
And I think that if we, you know, going back to what I was saying, like at yoga, there was no representation, like representation matters. So I feel
Yeah.
like we kind of created this podcast thing, this segment to represent, like, we don't have to agree with everything and
Yeah.
you don't have to formulate into anything.
Yeah.
But
And
also, like, who are we? I don't know. Like, we're
yeah,
just,
exactly. And
we're
like,
just,
don't agree with us. Don't, I'm constantly telling people like in the classes I teach, like, don't trust me. Like, read, do your research, form your own resonant
yeah.
opinion based on the stuff that you learn. Do not ever just take what I'm sharing as truth without checking me.
Yeah. And I feel like if somebody is like, take what I'm saying as truth, like maybe check them. Like,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
feel you know, we talked about this just the other day. Like, I feel like the more and more I like research and like dive in and experiment, the more I realize I don't know shit. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. The world is too big. The universe is too big.
Yeah.
The infinite is too big for
Yeah.
me to like be able to put my finger on it and be like, this is it. But I know
Yeah.
what it is to me, right? And
Right.
so
Yeah.
that's like literally all we can do. We're
Yeah.
not going to find the answers of the great mystery. Like it's called the great mystery for a reason.
Yeah.
We're not going to find all the answers
Yeah.
for it. We can find how they pertain to us and our
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, colonialism loves certainty. And it's very uncomfortable for us in the colonial world to like say or to not feel like we know anything. We want to like feel like we can categorize our knowledge. But truly, like as we dive into like consciousness studies and as we dive into metaphysics and like truth is so subjective to the person
Yeah.
or being experiencing it, and it is not a unified objective external phenomenon. It really depends on what is happening, and people know this. And if you're listening or watching, you have had moments in your life where something is true and then some more information is revealed to you and then that is no longer true for you. So
Yeah.
for this is the way for all of us, and it's so refreshing. And like for me, it takes the burden off of me as someone who's literally getting the highest degree in the land about knowing something, knowledge. Like it is such a burden off my shoulders to confidently say I don't know, i I don't know, or I'm unsure, or I've changed my mind about that thing. it it's a lot of pressure to like know with certainty.
Yeah. I agree. I think as human beings and especially as practitioners, there's so much pressure to know.
Yeah.
But when you like finally come to terms with flexibility, I think there's so
Yeah.
much like confidence and power in that
Yeah.
because like, even in my own offerings or practice, shit changes all the time.
Yeah.
Or I decide I don't want to do something or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that's like the most authentic I can be at that moment because
Totally. Yeah.
otherwise, like stuff becomes stagnant and then it does become
Yeah.
like a money making machine. And like,
Yeah.
that's not what this is about. Like, I was like just talking to my husband yesterday and we were talking about theology and the study of religion. And he was asking me, like, like, we were talking about politics and I was like, well, I mean, ultimately we really can't separate politics from religion or any kind of practice because this
Yeah.
is how it started. And he's like, damn, you're in your bag. But like, this is what does it for me. And I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm going to do with this information. And I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm going to do with my study, but I love it. And then I create my own belief system, my own practice. And it gives me all the confidence in the world. It gives me all the ability, all of the whatever, the support to know like I can do whatever the fuck I want and say what I
Absolutely.
want
Yeah.
because like this is just how I'm running my life. And I think that
Yeah.
that's ultimately what lots of people are looking for is like it's this like I want to connect to something bigger because I want to know what I'm doing here. But,
Yeah.
like, it's the realization like you can decide, just connect to them to help you out.
Yeah.
Um so I think it all like kind of really boils down to figuring out what you want, figuring out who you are, figuring out what you agree with, what you don't agree with, maybe down the line decide you want to switch your
Yeah.
mind up and saying like it's okay.
Yeah.
It's because I don't think there's a whole lot of narrative around that out there.
No. Yeah. Agreed. And figuring out what resonates with you. Because I think like I've taken yoga classes, but that's never resonated with, like, I never felt like, oh, this is my shit. Like it just never. And same thing with like Reiki too.
Yeah.
Like I know a lot of people practice Reiki and I have been attuned to it, and I certainly, well, I don't even know if I can say with certainty that I feel it, but it just didn't call me. But then something like the Akashic Records, as soon as I did it, I was like having an experience of remembering, and I was like, this is a yes, I have to pursue this. And so, and it defies logic sometimes what resonates. It defies the story of what you have in your mind about who you are and what you should be doing, but knowing that is so incredibly powerful. And like the one thing that we all should be doing is following what resonates for us.
Yeah. I think even if you don't have that huge holy shit moment, if you're being brought to it, there's something there for you to learn to add to something else. So I think, at least for me, I have a lot of clients that are like, what am I supposed to be doing? And I have this and this in front of me. And I'm like, go to it. Go. There might be something there. There might be a nugget there for you. You're not supposed to do anything.
We should have we should do an episode on resonance, because I think at this point everyone can feel it, but it doesn't always happen for me as an aha, like huge slap in the face. But I have definitely had clients that are like, oh, I don't feel resonance. And I'm like, bullshit, you just don't know what you're talking about. Like, let me help you. Which is me saying I'm certain, which I just said I'm not. But like, I know that I trust that people have this ability, but we're so taught early on to ignore and disavow what feels like a yes in favor of logical and safe stories for how we should live the trajectory of our lives.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that, because you were talking about this like, hell yeah, with the Akashic Records. And when I dove into the Akasha, I wanted to throw up and I felt sick nonstop. So like, but that was still resonance.
Exactly.
I knew it was going down. It just sucked a lot.
Well, that's like why we should talk about resonance, because resonance is different than positive thinking, which people think,
and
exactly. And so people think like, oh, just because this is unpleasant, I shouldn't be doing it. And that's not. Resonance will put you deep into something unpleasant, but it could be exactly right for your path. You know this. I know you know this.
But we'll dive into that. So okay, so Magical Baddies, what can people expect from us moving forward?
I think that people cannot expect authentic perspectives that, at least for me, like I'm not I feel confident enough now, after being a public facing figure on Instagram. I feel confident enough now to be like, I really am not here for agreement. I'm just here to like get out what I have to say. And what I have to say has been upsetting to people, and it's not the point that I want to upset people, but it feels intolerable to keep things to myself and to be inauthentic when I do share. So I feel like part of the nature of these conversations is that we are absolutely authentic.
I really thought you were going to say, I think people can't expect anything because they're unpredictable.
I mean, I don't think we're unpredictable, but I think like authenticity, especially from two people that like have criticisms of like status quo narratives, can feel unpredictable. Like I feel like there was maybe a time when I thought, here's the way you be spiritual. And I see a lot of my clients who've gone from like learning from me to becoming their own practitioners, going through like the stages of modern spirituality, where they start out with like pulling a card, and here's a crystal I use, and here's how I do a cord cutting, and here's how I do a full moon ceremony. Because those are things that are easy to grab onto. Those are like how-to things when you're starting out this practice. But I'm not going to say I don't do that stuff. Some of those things I do, but like, that's not what makes you connect to your essential soul level self. Like, those are practices that might work and might not work. And those are cultural practices too, that like other people in other cultures of the world don't do anything like that whatsoever. So I think we won't be predictable in that way.
Yeah, I think the one thing you'll hear from me a lot is this idea of the formulation to success. And I think that
Yeah.
that is, the baby practitioners or baby professionals, that's the formulation of success that we
Yeah.
see. And so we're like, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
And I think we see the formulation of success in all things that we do socially, privately, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that, yeah, I I just really thought you were gonna say unpredictable. But I think, yeah, you can expect authentic conversation. You can expect terrible jokes. You can expect some deep seriousness, and you can expect some like
Shit
maybe
talking.
inappropriate lightness too, because that's just
Yeah.
how we vibe.
Inappropriate lightness is a really funny way to say it, because it's almost like, I don't know. I think like, I don't think that you and I are shit talkers in a malicious way,
Mm-mm.
but I think that you and I will discuss something at length in a funny way, and with like honest criticism or critique of like a phenomenon or a person or a movement or, whatever, which can come off as shit talky, especially when you're having public conversations and there's like a decorum, there's like a prescription for how you should and shouldn't describe things.
Yeah.
But I would not be friends with you if I felt like you were malicious or like a mean girl. So like, I know that that's not in it, but we
Yeah, we're not
do.
like, I think more it's kind of like a really, yeah, it is a lightness. It's like the Step Brothers. Like we're here to fuck shit up, but we're just fucking up the status quo. Like I'm not a shit talker in a malicious way, but like I also think that what we're having are conversations that we would have in private, and we're inviting you in.
Yeah,
So this is
totally.
never anything that's like definitely pointed at anybody. We're calling anybody out.
Yeah,
That's not the vibe we're going on.
yeah,
Ultimately, in the end, I think that the core of what we are saying is like, question it, question everything, question reality, because
yeah,
that's the form of rebellion we're about. Because like,
yeah,
what is reality? Like, I'm not trying to sound like
yeah,
somebody smokes a ton of weed, but like, what is time? What is
yeah,
reality? What is
yeah,
belief? What is, and I think that that's like important for us to dive out, because I think spirituality, mysticism, magical practices are so much bigger than the homogenization that we have
yeah,
created in our modern society. But with that being said, I'm fucking cool with, things being sold at Urban Outfitters, because we've come a long way to where other people are starting to accept practices
yeah,
that were, people would get in a lot of trouble for back in the day. So I
yeah,
think there's kind of like a
yeah,
balance here. And
yeah,
I think that these conversations, like, we're gonna want to hear from the listeners or the watchers.
yeah,
That's an archangel joke. But we're gonna want to hear from from listeners and watchers, like on things they want us to cover, or we'll do questions. But I think that we both come with a lot of experience and a lot of opinions.
yeah, yeah. I want to give a caveat to my shit talking. Like, I want to give an appendix to my shit talking comment. Um, it's really actually impossible for me to dislike somebody on a core level, and that comes back to my spiritual practice. It comes back to my Akashic work, which I feel like part of my training in my Akashic work has been to fall in love with people.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I think that I was very skeptical of people, fearful of people, afraid that people wouldn't like me anyway, so I'm not going to love them. And this Akashic practice, along with like my decolonial education, all this stuff, it's flipped my how I see people right out the gate. And so it doesn't mean I can't be like a critic of things that people do or say, but at the core, I know that every person is good. At the very core of their soul, I believe that about people. And so it becomes almost like charming to me when someone is obnoxious or doing something stupid, or like it becomes like I don't know. I think the Akashic perspective has given me an ability to just, even without being in the practice, without being in my records, without having literally opened the records or whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
having an ability to like see how beautiful people are even when they're in the midst of their bullshit. I don't know. So I just want to say that to anyone who's like, wow, Leah's a bitch.
I would say that's a long way of saying what I'm about to say, which is it's very easy for me to say, yeah, fuck that person. I don't care for
Yeah.
them, but I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get why they're doing it, or I
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
whatever, or like I'm okay. It's not like that big of a deal. I just
Yeah.
personally don't fuck with that person. So
Exactly.
or
Exactly.
or thing or movement or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my shit talking is very much that, because I think it's okay to dislike people. I think
Right.
it's okay
Yeah.
not to fuck with people or like not to vibe
Yeah.
with people.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger thing is, and this is also, through the Akasha, which I think is going to be an episode because
Yeah.
that's how we met. But through the Akasha and through Bhakti, my heart's opened up enough to be like, I understand why
Yeah.
this person is doing this, or I
Yeah.
get the point of view, and I can't be offended by that because their point of
Yeah.
view is
Yeah.
valid. But I can feel
Yeah.
offended. Those are like
Right.
very, it's
Yeah.
nuanced, but so
Yeah.
that I can
Yeah.
not fuck with somebody, but like I get it. So my
Yeah.
shit talking will always be that.
100%. I can't believe the projections that people make onto people that choose, people that are committed to a spiritual path, people that are outwardly spiritual, people that are like mystics. There's like a projection of you're no longer a human, that you're somehow enlightened above. I hate this term so much, like low vibrational emotions, like that you somehow won't be triggered or offended by something. And that is like such a scary and dangerous like thing to believe, because
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely, like I think like spirituality has like helped me affirm my humanity more than anything. It's helped me like dig in and explore and even have like wonder and sometimes amusement for when I am pissed off or triggered or hurt or like somebody's really like just or
Yeah.
like, why do I have these responses to people? It makes me like, well, what is it, Leah? What's going on here? Instead of the like trying to dodge it and bypass it, like, oh, I don't feel anything, I am enlightened, I meditate on it. And no, it's like I came here to be in this body and feel these things
Yeah.
intentionally. I'm here for this.
I think like the other thing I want to add to that is the feeling that people get where they're like, what do I have to learn from this? Which is
Yeah.
important. But like sometimes
Yeah.
you're not supposed to learn anything from it. Sometimes you're just
Yeah.
supposed to like process it. And I think one of the things that like when I was like, oh, Leah is my fucking person, was when I was like really angry and I called you and you're like, yeah, let's hear it. No, 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 talk
Yeah.
about it. And like
Yeah.
I just like unleashed because, you know, I always felt really torn in half about my fire. And my fire is not necessarily always anger.
Right.
Sometimes it's just like it, initiative or force. Like it just I can be that way. Or like just like I'm not down with the bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in a spiritual world or what I was presented with, that was not okay.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
something wrong with me. And I
Yeah.
always felt torn about that. And
Yeah.
so I think it's okay to not fuck with people. I think it's okay to like
Yeah.
be angry. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
And think about like if we think about the, deities and stories and myths and whatever, even down to, angelology, like there's seraphim, there's angels of fire, there
Yeah.
are defenders, there are fighters there.
Absolutely.
So I think that that's the other thing that we kind of
Yeah.
add to the mix of this. It's okay to be like, yo, fuck that.
Yeah.
Completely
Totally.
okay to do
Totally.
that.
And I also think what you're describing and what we should like talk about is like, because you said in the spiritual world, but also you could take that phrase out and be like in the white supremacist culture where, whiteness and I'm not talking about anyone individual, but like whiteness as a cultural phenomenon is very uncomfortable with anger, very uncomfortable with just disagreement. And so it will create cultural norms that shut that down and make you think that you're, gaslight you into believing like you're wrong for feeling these things, instead of let it flow through you. And then you'll get, because like when you said, like, when people ask like, well, what am I supposed to learn? That immediately to me is like, we can't stop working. We're constantly laboring. So we want to know, like, this terrible thing happened, but I don't know what to do other than labor. So how can I at least learn from it? And like, okay, maybe some learning will come, but maybe it's not going to come now. Maybe it doesn't come for years. And so like, how do you process what you're going through right now without any expectation of like a neat bow around it as an outcome? Like,
maybe you learn to be messy. Maybe you learn to
Yeah.
actually express yourself.
Yeah.
So and I get what you're saying, the whiteness. And again, like, this isn't like anyone's culture. It is whiteness, but that code switching that has to come with that, the softness that like, I have to present myself this way so you're comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think as two people that are mixed, that are, BIPOC, that's something we will talk about a lot. Like, this feeling that we have to tone it down. And what does that fairness really come to? Like, it's just like it's gatekeeping. That's really what it is. So I think Magical Baddies is, probably going to make some people uncomfortable. Probably people are going to like vibe with it. Like, it's just real. And there's not going to be a whole lot of editing in our conversation. So that's what people can expect. But I'm really excited about the next few episodes we're going to record. Honestly, I'm excited about all of it. But
me too.
I guess like the rhythm people can expect is, we're going to put a few out, and then we're just going to try to do it every month, essentially. Yeah. Cool. So
and
I'm
pause
excited
when we want to and do whatever we want, because there's no parents and no rules.
So maybe in that way, we're also, they can expect not to expect anything.
We're not chained to content creation. I don't want to be that.
No, not at all. But I definitely want viewers and listeners to know, like, this isn't, since we're inviting you in this conversation, like, there is going to be opportunity for you guys to send in questions or request topics or whatever. And eventually, I think we want to bring in other practitioners too. So if it's something that maybe Leah and I can't dive into, or maybe we're just want to add another person to it, like, we're down for this, because I think this whole conversation really was about community, right? And that's our next topic. But the idea of community, of what it means, is like, it doesn't mean everyone's the same and everybody feels the same. And we want to invite different perspectives, because various perspectives is really important for both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I'm super excited. Yeah, this is gonna be fun.
So tell your moms, tell your friends. Tell everybody.
We could do this every weekend.
We do this every weekend. Cool. So Leah, how can people follow you? I'm gonna put it on the end too. But
okay, you can follow me on Instagram at Crystals of Altamira, ALTAMIRA. And you can also check out my new beautiful website, crystalsofaltamira.com. How about you?
Smoke signals. No. So I'm at Divine Void Sophia, and website's the same. Pretty easy. That's it.
Cool. This is so fun.
I'm excited. All right, guys. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, all the fun stuff that everyone says at the end of their videos and of their podcasts. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.